I'm Jen West, professional rebel of delight.
And I'm Dave Wiesdock, sage of creative scaffolding.
And this is Shadow Casting. Welcome back to another episode of Shadow Casting. It's good to have our audience with us. We are back into our exploration of play mindset. And this week, we are going to be talking about moving from blame to balance through acceptance. But before we get started on that, let's do a quick recap of basically what we've been covering so far. So first, play mindset. What is it? We did an entire recording on this already, so I highly recommend going all the way back to the beginning and listening to our first episode. It'll give you a lot of content and ideas about what we're talking about here. But basically, we are taking an idea that our mindset has two general cycles. We are either in a survival cycle, which is comprised of living in the past or being stuck in a pattern. We're moving from anxiety and from autopilot, and we live in a state of fear and blame, and we don't get moving, and we're kind of stuck in patterns. Or we can flip the switch and jump into a fulfillment cycle. And this cycle is a lot more present in what's happening in the world, and we're moving into a future. We're growing, we're changing, we're able to adapt. We let go of the patterns so we can be in the world as we are. So presence, curiosity, and non-judgment and personal responsibility, these are the things that we move from. And so those are the two cycles. And then the reason it's called play is it first came about from a tool by David Kars called Finite and Infinite Games, and realizing that we can be in two types of games, and we think the world we live in is like a finite game, and finite games are about rules and boundaries, and there's a winner and a loser. Games like chess and football, those kind, they have an end point. Somebody wins, somebody loses. But life is actually more of an infinite game. There are some rules, but they're malleable. And as you play, the goal is to keep playing. So you can have people come in, people leave, the boundaries are flexible. And this is more how life is. And the fulfillment cycle runs from more that infinite game mindset. Lastly, before we dive in today, play is an acronym. It stands for a practice that shines a light on actions that serve you. So it's all about your growth and taking things in a direction that make you happy and fulfilled and enjoying and thriving in your life. Did I miss anything, Dave?
I think that was great. Yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah, today is tool number 4. And before that, we've obviously gone through a few more tools. And the idea of these tools overall is that we are leaning into discomfort, right? The body sensations, the mental noise that happens and arises within us when we're met with situations in life, whether externally or internally driven. And the idea is that by moving from our survival cycle, which is, as we've talked about so far, could be things like anxiety, autopilot, fear. And today we're going to start talking about blame. And we move into our fulfillment cycle. So we move into things like excitement, presence, compassion. And then today we're going to talk about balance.
Yep, exactly. So if you want to learn more about discomfort, presence, or non-judgment, then go back and listen to some of our previous episodes. But today, our focus is on blame to balance through acceptance. And like I said last week, the two hardest to wrap our mind around and to really get into is last week's non-judgment and this week's acceptance. It's just hard. And it's just from the way that we've learned about those and how we've changed what they mean in our head. And feels like we're giving up with both of them if we jump into them. So we're going to break it down today. We're going to show how it's useful and how you can start to start a cultivation practice to get you in there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I love this shit. Okay. So first, survival cycle and blame. This is such an ingrained part of who we are. It really is. It's probably the easiest thing we fall into because when something goes wrong and we don't like where our life is or what's happening, even as small children, when things are wrong, it just makes sense to blame somebody else, to blame circumstances, to blame ourselves. It's just kind of the way we're wired, which is the point of the survival cycle. It's the more natural instinct in our being to stay alive. But we want to get to the other side. We want to get to where we're thriving and fulfilled.
I actually really like that. So it's less it's even look at you using your non-judgment of the survival cycle. It's not even a thing to judge. It is a reactionary habit that we have in place to survive. And while that is essential, what we're trying to do is say, okay, you've survived, you've made it to this point. Let's take it to the next level. We talk about how we want this podcast to be geared towards people that are looking for that next level of fulfillment, that higher sense of purpose in their life. And that's, I think, a great lens to shine here is that it's not that we're saying that any one cycle is better or worse than the other. It's just if you want to be able to move towards that level of ease in life, you have to change your mindset. You have to change the tools you're using. And the tools that you've been using so far have gotten you here. And we got to try some new ones to get you to that next step. So it's really coming from like non-judgment and learning to be in, as we're going to talk about today, acceptance.
Yeah, because we've used these tools, they've been successful. They're a way to get through life. And life feels harder. We suffer it more when we're in the survival cycle. And we're in a pattern. So we do the same things over again and we wonder why we're not moving forward. It's okay to be in survival. We go into it, we will go back to it. That's why there are so many tools because we can pop in and pop out. And being more in the fulfillment cycle gives us more choices, makes our life more rewarding, makes it easier to go through. We're able to hold more space and be more present and add more value to those around us because we're calmer, we're more embodied, and we're in a space that we can support somebody else who needs it.
And when we're not, one of the things we can be in is blame. So, there was one other thought that came to mind too. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't share it, although maybe for the sake of the podcast recording, we'll cut it. But the other thing that I think is worth noting here is that acceptance and non-judgment, you brought this up, that they have this almost sort of passive quality to them. And I want to say, looking at the words on a very superficial level, the implication or the impliedness of those words is the connotation of the word, that what I'm trying to get at, is very passive. But there is such an active quality here with acceptance and with non-judgment. There's still an action that you have to take. And so in this case, with this tool that we're trying to work on with acceptance, it's recognizing that the action that we're taking right now when we're in survival is resistance. We're resisting what is happening right now. And when we learn through all the tools out there, whether you use mindfulness meditation practice, whether you use breathing, whether you use, what's that called? Like where they do like the tapping, the biofeedback, and to like ground yourself to bring you back into what is. When we get back to that spot, that's where we have the power to make different choices. We can still make the same choice too. Sometimes you still will. And so one of the practices is learning to just be able to be with what is and not change it.
People get into blame because something has gone wrong and we're not happy about that place that we're in. So, like Dave said, when we get into that spot that we don't like, it creates resistance in us. And then we need something that created that. That resistance says it's somebody's fault, it's somebody's responsibility. And that's how we get to blame because it's the the easiest one to go to. And sometimes we blame other people because they made the mistake. And if you're listening to this, it's like, well, what else are we supposed to do? Just let them do it and then we take all of that on us? You've got to, it was their fault it broke. Blame isn't the way. And we'll show that in a minute. But with blame, it could also be our fault. And when we move into blame of ourselves, that doesn't create action. It often creates this sense of shame. I've done something wrong. Maybe I've done it again. And people are going to judge me because they're going to blame me for it. And it creates negative outcomes. It can even make us defensive on ourselves. Like, I did it wrong. I'm such a bad person. If it wasn't for me, everything would be fine. And we're still resisting the outcome. But then we're stuck. No actions being taken because we're focused on the past. We're assigning fault and we're creating defensiveness. And it's hindering any momentum to do something different.
Yes. This reminds me of someone that we like to reference a lot on our podcast, Brene Brown. And we've got to hit this home. I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, always worth repeating. Brene Brown, psychologist, TEDx speaker, published a lot of books. She writes about vulnerability, blame, shame, guilt, the whole 9 yards. And what she says is that essentially shame is the idea or the feeling of being that you are fundamentally flawed and unworthy, while guilt is this feeling of discomfort with an associated action or behavior. Or as she more simply says it, shame is I am bad, guilt is I did something bad. And at the end of the day, it's not that you are trying to blame yourself, like Jen was talking about. We're not trying to point the finger internally. What this does is it creates a locus of control. See, the thing is that when we're not in acceptance, when we're resisting what is happening to us and we start blaming outside circumstances or blaming ourselves, oh, I'm a klutz, I'm unorganized, whatever. What happens is the blame and the resistance turns into shame. So it's that person is bad, I am bad. And when we come from this place of judgment and resistance, we're obviously not accepting what is happening right now with us. And we're removing the ability to make different choices that can create a more fulfilling outcome and getting us into that fulfillment cycle. So accountability acknowledges guilt. This is the other side of Brene Brown's coin of shame, guilt. Again, shame is something we are bad. Guilt is we did something bad. Again, accountability creates the locus of control where you are now in the reins and you are now steering the car. And so the idea here isn't to start like self-flagellation, like beating yourself up because you're a bad person and you did something bad. It's to go, okay, this is what I did. Where can I operate from here now? Where can I move from where I'm at to a space of fulfillment?
100%. And that's really the key. Dave hit on it. If blame isn't the answer, oh, and I forgot one other thing we blame, circumstances. So it's just out of our control completely. Circumstances suck and we're just stuck. And that's just blaming and separating yourself from everything because you have no control over it. Not useful either. And you're still stuck in that resistance. But if you're moving out of blame, what do you do? Because there was still a fault somewhere if people are involved. If things didn't go the way that it was planned or organized or a project didn't work out, I mean, sometimes outcomes just don't work. They just don't. We don't always get the fruits of our labor,
Yeah.
but we get our labor. So if we're in blame, you've got to change away from blame to accountability, which Dave mentioned. And accountability, the words sound similar, but accountability is so much more powerful because accountability doesn't say, who is at fault? It says, what happened and how can we make it better next time? So with accountability, we're focused on the future and it emphasizes our empowerment and ownership to make change. It promotes problem solving and it encourages growth. Maybe it was a part of our personality that if we modify or keep working, if we get to know our Myers Briggs a little better and start using our personality type to enhance ourselves instead of making excuses, these are the things accountability does. But accountability only comes when we can accept what is. We can't be resistant to it. And so that's where our tool comes in for acceptance. And the beauty of going into acceptance and being able to move into accountability really moves us into that higher side quality fulfillment of balance.
What I often think about are the quote unquote no win scenarios that we get ourselves into, or the complete 100% blame game. You know, the one that you were just talking about where the circumstance was completely out of your control. You had no say in it.
Those are the easiest. And then you can stay in resentment. Didn't talk about that part.
Well, or the defensiveness, right? One of the examples I was thinking of is when you get rear-ended in a car accident, right?
Hmm.
When you were just driving, you are in the flow of traffic, you are being the good driver. The person behind you wasn't. They're clearly at fault. They came up, they weren't paying attention, they rear-ended you. For sake of argument, let's assume that this is just kind of that standard rear-ended accident, right? They hit fender bender, everyone's safe,
Yeah.
airbag off.
Yeah. You're like stopped at a stoplight and they're not paying attention. Boom. But you really had no say in this.
Exactly. It's so easy to still go into blame, right? Their fault. They weren't paying attention. I had nothing to do with this. You might be right. But
I
where's
actually did have this happen, not a fender bender, but recently I was driving
oh,
up a Canyon road and the other driver coming head on towards me drifted into my lane suddenly and I couldn't get out of the way and I did get hit and it totaled my car. Nobody was hurt, but that just happened to me.
great. So let's play with the tool with your example then. So it
Right.
would have been easy for you to get into blame with this driver, right? He wasn't paying attention. He was on the wrong side of the road. He might have been under the influence.
Yeah.
You could have assigned all the fault to him and taken none of the none of I mean, there was no accountability to take, right? You actually tried to get out of the way. You acted in the best interest of yourself, and I think Liam was in the car with you, right? Your kid.
Yeah. And I did take my part of it. There were things after the fact that I was like, what if I would have blown my horn? Because I didn't use my horn. Everything happened very quickly. But I could have, but I didn't. It's not a natural instinct. And that might have changed the outcome. So there was my side as well. But yeah, so I could have blamed myself for failing, not getting out of the way, not going off the road far enough. I could totally blame them because from my vantage point of it, it looked like they went to reach from something and looked down and the car swerved over across the lane. That's how I took it. And I could totally put it on them and I could be angry, but really with blaming them, I would be with my car that was broken and the wheel is off and be in resistance to the fact that now I don't have a car and I now have to go through insurance and do all the processes and just be angry and resentful and bitter and all of the other emotions that come with that because
Yeah.
I'm in a resistance. It shouldn't have happened. I should have been able to go skiing that day. this is not working out the way I want. And then I could go into like future casting badly, you get into that survival cycle. My son could have been injured. We could have been hurt. If we would have been on the other side of the road, we would have ended up in the river over a cliff, you know? So all of these things can happen if blame comes into play. But what's not happening is the recognition of the truth of things or doing anything about it.
Right. And that's where I was trying to take this next is you moved into accountability, right? You just like you were saying, instead of saying I should have, actually, that was really interesting. So your own word choices revealed that you were in accountability even when you were trying to talk from blame, which is really funny because you said I could have, which is accountability because you could have. Blame would have been I should have, right? Blame would have been I should have honked on my horn. I should have done this. Maybe you even go so far as to say I shouldn't have been driving that day. I should have taken that other route. I should have whatever. Then you start to create situations that aren't even realistic with the should have. And that's where blame can really bite you in the ass, right? When you start to move to this almost ethereal, you can create any scenario you want. And that's really what we're getting at is blame takes you out of the control of the situation. But Jen, even in her own word choice, was already taking the accountability. She could have done those things. And
I practice what I preach.
crazy, right? And but the other part of accountability was the promoting problem solving, the learning, the growing. As you were going through this experience after the fact, there were things that you learned even then, right?
Right. Well, and here's the funny thing when you're in acceptance, and you really have to be in acceptance before you can go into accountability. Otherwise, blame takes over. That's why acceptance is the tool. It's the thing you use to get to balance. And part of being in balance is accountability. But if you're in acceptance, like my son was asleep when this happened. So he's sleeping on the way up to the mountain to go skiing, and this car hits us in the rear. I get out of the way enough that it hits the back quarter panel up the driver's side, takes off the tire, spins the car around off the road, but everybody's fine. And my son wakes up to us stopped backwards on the side of the road next to a cliff wall and the tire rolling by the car on his side. And he's like, what just happened? But because there was this energy of that happened instead of resistance to why did that happen or this isn't supposed to happen, we got out of the car and we did what was necessary. We called the police and we checked on the other drivers and we were both looking around. And then we just really started having fun and looking at the damage to our car because we weren't hurt and they weren't hurt. And we were off the road. Somebody checked on us, but we could go, holy cow, look at our tire. And we were taking pictures, yes, for follow up, but it was also kind of fun, you know, and then accountability can kick in because here we are. This is what it is. There's no changing that. And so I could be mad and resentful at the other guy, or I can just move through the world. And my son and I chose to move through the world. Yes, we weren't going skiing, but now we had a new thing we were doing. Granted, later, I got quite frustrated with insurance, but that's a different, that's insurance.
Well, that's where that problem solving and learning and growth came in.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely grew as a person working through insurance.
I really admire how you brought up, and even within that situation, you were already reframing the mindset. You were moving through the tool of the acceptance into balance. So I thought that was a great segue. And maybe we can talk about the tools and moving through that space and then bring us back to that. Because I think you brought up some interesting things that we can.
Sure. So let's jump into balance. How are these two opposites? We've kind of pointed it out. It's like, why isn't the fulfillment side accountability versus balance? And accountability, yeah, you get into it, but what's really created is a different sense of how you are in the world. That's what all of these are. That's what compassion is. That's what presence is. That's what excitement is. It's a different quality of living your life. And accountability is not really a quality, it's just something that kind of comes out of the quality. So, balance in and of itself is a state of being, is something through the practice of acceptance that you grow into. You can't make it happen. Like you can make yourself accountable. Like, I'm not going to blame them. I'm just going to move on to the future and I'm going to fix it and we're going to move on. So, you can force accountability. You can't force balance. It grows from learning to accept what is and then leaning into it. And since it's an abstract, I like to go back to a concrete. So just think about physical balance. If you've worked with your body enough, you can step on any surface and keep your balance most of the time. Or if you lose it, you don't completely crash and burn. You're not injuring a shoulder. So if you're walking along and you step on ice and you've built the quality of balance in your system, your foot takes that and your momentum shifts and you're able to keep going even though one of your feet slipped out from under you. Or if you step on a surface and it's uneven, you equalize and you come back to yourself and your feet start to realize how it wiggles and you're able to stay on. Or if you can't stay on that surface, you're able to pop off and still stay in a safe way, whether that be rolling or jumping off and kind of trotting a few steps. That's kind of a horse term. Jogging a few steps.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with it, right, Dave? Or
Oh,
just
oh my
moving to
goodness.
the next level of athletics, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, for everyone listening, balance was a really hard concept for me to understand when you first introduced me to disbalance, because balance before then was always a 50-50 split. They talk about work life balance is the big one where balance comes out a lot in colloquially, colloquially, colloquially. Anyway,
In
we're
my head, it works, but yeah.
yeah, no, I don't even know. Now I'm not even sure that that's a word. But besides the point, that's where most people are familiar when we talk about balance from a self growth perspective. Everyone talks about finding that work life balance, the ability to be and do the things that they want to in their own life, while also still maintaining the presence at work, while also still maintaining being the husband, father, wife, mother, son, daughter, parent to whoever. And really, balance is more what you were talking about, which is it's the ability to actually, let me back up. Physical balance, if I were to watch, actually, I still do it. Shoot, forget watching like a kid do it. When you still goof off and you're trying to balance yourself while you walk on the side of the concrete, the side of a sidewalk, right? And you're still trying to balance yourself or walk like you're on a balance beam. There's constant little micro adjustments that your body is making based on the information it's receiving. If you lean a little too far left, your body tries to adjust yourself right, and vice versa. If you try to lean too far forward, your body tries to lean you back. And it's constant feedback that is creating your ability to be balanced. And the reason I bring this up is because what your body is doing is it by leaning you one way or the other is it's trying to keep your center of gravity above whatever you're balancing on. And so when we talk about balance from a a personal perspective, it's still the same idea. Can we make micro adjustments in our world, in our day-to-day life where we don't know what we're stepping into from time to time? And can we maintain our own center of gravity? Because that's really what fulfillment is. In the most mundane sense of it, it is your ability to stay true to who you are regardless of what's happening around you. And that's really hard. And the reason that we sacrifice our center of gravity is because sometimes life knocks us down and we have to learn how to get up. And the first way that we learn how to correct our balance is by accepting how we got there in the first place. You can't make an adjustment on something that you're not willing to look at and face.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to see, was it something that I can grow from? that I can change in the future, mistakes happen. And if we resist them, then we just feel bad and we get into that cycle of we're just not good at things. But if we accept them, we could go, wow, that happened. Can I fix it first? Like, can I make amends if it was to someone or you broke something? Can I make amends? And then what can I do to not do it again? And all of those are growth. And some things you can't always plan for. So let's go back to physical. If you're walking and you step on something that's now unstable, you can't predict that. You can just prepare your body, and sometimes you can recover from it in the moment, and sometimes you can't. So, what skills do you have for when you can't? Can you roll? That's huge. When you hit the ground, can you break fall so that you're just not taking it in one place? Have you learned to not stick your hand out and catch yourself because that's going to hurt your wrist? That's going to hurt your elbow or your shoulders. It's the skills that when things don't go right, you can still flow. And that's kind of what happened to me with my car accident. It didn't work. We fell, our car spun out, we had no car. But through accepting that, then the skills that have developed, I mean, I'm 48 years old. So over the course of my 48 years, I could bring those into play and start using them to deal with my mindset, to keep my son happy. Neither one of us were scared. Neither one of us were injured. But that even my son's teachers were like, "Are you okay? Were you okay when you had to get back in another car?" And he's like, "Yeah, why would I care?" Because it didn't create trauma in him, because it was just something that happened, and now we're exploring it, and now we move on to the next thing.
Yeah. There's another point I want to hit on with balance. I really love this topic. See, I told you this is just some really meaty stuff in here. So there's another way that I want to look at balance, and then I want to tie this to how you guys were able to progress through that. So balance physically, like biologically within us, is maintained in three ways. And those ways are our visual system, so our eyes, the vestibular system, so, our inner ear, and then the proprioceptive system, which is usually the feedback that we get from where we are in space with our body. So our joints are usually the feedback, the muscles. And the idea here, and how I'm tying this, is that that's physically. Mentally, we have three similar systems that help us know if we're maintaining our balance and our center of gravity. Because here's how I would ask this to the audience. How would you know when you go to work how you are maintaining your center of gravity, how you are maintaining yourself in your work environment? You might go, "Oh, I know it's me because of the job title I have, or I know it's me because of the team that I work with every day." And those are all outside of yourself. And I just named all three things that are inside of you: your eyes,
Yeah.
your ears, your nerves.
And audience, pop quiz. If you've listened to our podcast episodes, the answer was in the one that we did on balance.
Oh,
Do you remember?
have we talked about this before? Oh,
Yeah. So, do you remember what are the three things that create internal balance? And if you don't remember, Dave, you can, of course, share.
well, see, I was going to say something else. Now I'm trying to remember what we said there because I don't want to. I was going to say like our values, our purpose.
Yep. The
What's
three things are vision, so looking to the future, and your values and your mission. And mission is purpose.
mission? Okay. See, so values, mission. What's the third one then?
Vision. It's being able to look out into the future, just like our eyes look out into the future.
Okay. I was making values and vision. Beautiful. Okay. See, so we have talked about this. Beautiful. That's where I'm getting at with this, is that your ability to maintain balance is within yourself. It has nothing to do. The only reason that it has anything to do with the outside is because the outside provides the context with how you decide to maintain your balance. If you are balancing on a really wide piece of like a really wide board or a plank, you have more room and more flexibility to give or take one side or the other. If you're walking on a tightrope, you have to maintain a much tighter center of gravity. You have to have more control over those systems. And that's where I'm getting at with this is the way to that is through acceptance. If we are constantly looking at the tightrope going, I wish I could walk on a plank, then we're never going to be able to grow and balance ourselves on the tightrope that we're on. And so tying this back to your story with your son in the car accident, yeah, it would have been great had you guys not gone in the car accident, had you made it safely. Well, and thankfully you guys were safe, but had you made it without incident to the ski resort, and you could have been focused on that the whole time and been in your own suffering from that, right? Because you're resisting what happened. Instead, you accepted what was and you moved from balance. You moved from your values, which is why I wanted to tie that in. Because instead of making it a drama and a trauma, you went, how do I play with this? How do I lean into my curiosity? Where can I bring fun into something that could have been such a different energy and environment? You brought fun into.
It was delightful riding in the back of a police car.
You brought your delight. Exactly. And see, I'm sitting here going, thinking of all the car accidents I've been in. And I'm like, no, fun is not anywhere on the top 5 of how I would describe. So it was
And
just
injury does change that. But yeah, since nobody was hurt and even the impact, there was no, the next day, none of us had whiplash because of how it hit. We just kind of spun in a really smooth circle and we didn't impact anything. So you still have to accept if you're injured, but it doesn't make it fun anymore. We had the opportunity for it to be fun and playful.
and you leaned into your truth.
Yes.
Anyway.
My truth.
Yeah. And so you moved through acceptance. And I see why this is so tough with non-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. About at the beginning of the podcast, it's active.
It's really hard. And so now we've talked about blame, we've mentioned acceptance, and we've talked about what balance is, where you will get, what you will cultivate from leaning into acceptance. But what is acceptance? And this is where it gets hard because for a lot of people, the meaning of acceptance is giving up and living with it. You're stuck with it and there's nothing you can do. And people don't want that. They don't want acceptance. They don't want to accept something because they want to change it. But you can't change what happened. You can't. You can just move from where you are to the next thing. And acceptance is looking at where you are and what is real and what is true. And it does play with the non-judgment where you're like, this is where it is, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's not saying when you accept something that you like it. That's another misnomer that people think. They think if I accept that, that means I have to like it. And it's like, no, I did not like that I got in a car accident. I was able to play with it, but not having a car and having to call my husband to come and get me when he had 1,000 things to do, that wasn't cool. It wasn't what we wanted, but it's what was. And you have to get to the place where, yeah, this is, I mean, we easily accept the things we like. So, but we have to accept the things we don't like too.
Yeah. And I feel we keep harping on the car accident, but this is just such a great story because there's so many ways that we can play with just had one piece changed. You can see that you would still lean into it the same way. For example, had we replayed that car accident and let's say, God forbid, maybe you broke your arm or something, right? You broke a bone. I know you would have still turned that into something of delight because that is who you are. And that's what I'm trying to get at. It's not that everyone needs to make a bad situation fun or even delightful because not every bad situation feels that way. But because you accepted what the situation was, you could come from balance, you can maintain and recalibrate with your center of gravity. And one of the ways that you, as Jen, recalibrated was bringing delight into the situation. had I been in that same scenario and it happened the exact same way, I don't know that I would have injected play. Not because I wouldn't have wanted to try to make it fun or anything, but because that's not how I recalibrated my center of gravity. That's not how I show up with balance in my life. And so that's the other crazy nuance of this is that by accepting what is, you allow yourself to bring your personality, your gifts, your talents, your sense of self to the situation. And spoiler, that's kind of how you feel fulfilled. It's when we move from who we are and not with resistance with what is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
you would
you,
have come with curiosity.
Mhm. Yeah, I would have been analyzing the crap out of that situation. I would have been like, huh, well,
How did the tire come off?
yeah, yeah. Where were the other cars? Who was driving?
Yeah.
What time of day was it? Was the sun in my eyes? Was the sun in their eyes? Those are all the things that immediately popped to mind. Actually, I think when we had the conversation the first time you told me what happened, I think I asked you like 7 questions because that's where my brain goes.
Yeah, my son is more analytical too. So he was crazy curious about how the wheel could have come off and where the how that other car ended up where it was. And yeah, his brain went into his higher balanced place.
Oh, my brain just exploded. And this is freaking why we talk about shadow casting, being shadow casting, and celebrating our freaking humanity right there. Because you were able to go to your fulfillment cycle into acceptance, and you were able to cast out who you were. Your son was not only able to have a situation that could have been more traumatic, not be that, but bonus, he just got more validated in who he was and who he is and more confident in his own calibration system. Because by being in acceptance with where you were, he was allowed to be in acceptance where he was and move from his personality. And that's how we celebrate our humanity and why this is so freaking important and critical. It's because what you do ripples outward. And so by learning to accept and be where we are, we can allow others to accept and be where they are, and we create a more fulfilled society that way.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't say it better myself. As you would say, Dave, chef's kiss. Yeah. So let's lean into acceptance. You're like, okay, it's a tool. How do I use it? Give me something practical. First, let's just get our opposites together. So we have resistance or we have acceptance. And resistance is in opposition. It's struggling and it doesn't accept what led up to the current happening. It leads to emotions of avoidance and denial and complaining and resentment. And we've all been there where we complain and complain and complain, but nothing gets done and we're in denial because it sucks and it's not what we want. So first we have to recognize we're in resistance. We have to notice, am I complaining? Am I avoiding? Am I denying? Am I in resentment? And sometimes, depending on your personality, you may notice yourself in complaining more than resentment. But whatever you notice first helps. That's why we started with these other tools because they often come before. You have to wake up, you have to feel the discomfort, and then you can go into, oh, I'm in resentment. I have to take a look at what is and see that it is. And that's where it's like, this is what is. I can't change what happened to stop what is. How do I move forward? And so it's a 3-step process, basically. Recognize when you're in resistance, take a step back and get present, and then take in what is with your skill of non-judgment. And then you're moving. Once you start taking in what is, you're moving into acceptance. You're starting to feel it. And you'll feel the energy shift. When you move into acceptance, there's kind of a letting go of control because you're not trying to fix what happened because you can't. It happened. There's nothing to do now. It's over. So you let go of the control of trying to change it. Then you're present, and then you can make changes to move forward. And that energy feels good because you've recreated a new control. I have choices. I can make change. I'm going to grow. This is when you start to feel that tool come alive.
I just had a epiphany with that. You're right. You know, we acceptance is tough because you're right. It is a letting go and you feel like you're giving up control. But to paraphrase what you literally just said, it actually is what gives you the control. You're not
Right.
really in control when you're moving from reaction. You're actually acting from habit and pattern. You're actually in less control when you're resisting what happens. In fact, the only way to get control is through acceptance. It's a paradox.
It is. It's because you're trying to control something that's over.
Yeah.
You want to change it, and you can't change what already happened. And so acceptance allows you to get to the reality you're in and then take control of what happens next. And you can learn from the past. You could be like, wow, I did this thing, don't want to have it happen again. You know, but that's what it is. To create real control is to first accept what is. Yeah. And then as you do that, it lessens the suffering and you feel more emotionally stable. You get to that place of balance where you're calm and your emotions settle. It's like still water. If it's muddy and stuff and you play in a pond, it gets even more muddy. This allows it to settle and it gets clear and you start to see what needs to happen next. And that's the acceptance is the allowing the water to clear so you can see. And so that's your practice is learning how to see reality for what it is, to move out of the resistance and accept.
I'm just letting that sit. That was so. What's our challenge for the week? Because that was beautiful.
So that's the challenge for the week to really recognize resistance, because that's going to be the first step. If you don't recognize the resistance you're in and the fact that you're in denial or in that place of wanting to shift everything, where you're complaining a lot or you're feeling the resentment or you're even avoiding the situation because God, you don't want it to be the situation, recognize it. That's the first step. Oh my God, I'm complaining. I told 10 friends. Step one. Then move into acceptance. And that's the tool where you sit down and you say, this is what is now. I don't like it. I don't like how it was created. I don't know. I don't like that either I created or somebody else, but this is what it is. And that's where this tool is. This is what it is. And hopefully through our podcast, you've already started playing with your values. You already know or you've started to lean into your mission or your purpose or that energy. And you see where you want to go. Or even if you don't see where you want to go, you don't need all of your balance tools to work. You can close your eyes and stand on one foot. And if you practice, it happens. You sink into your balance and solutions start to come. You gain control. That seemed like a good challenge, Dave.
Yeah, I was letting you cook, as the kids say. That was great.
All right.
I really want to add no follow-up because that is just
All right. Well, then wrap it up for me, sir.
all right. Well, as always, thank you guys for listening to our podcast today. We're enjoying pushing these out and sharing our thoughts with you guys. But as always, keep sharing your thoughts with us. You know, we love the feedback and we love hearing from our audience. So make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to. Share us out with your friends and family. Drop us a like or a comment. Let us know how you did with this or any other challenge. And let us know what you're thinking of this first series that we're running on Play Mindset. If we get a lot of good feedback, maybe we'll figure out a next series to do after this one.
And until next time.
See ya.